Research shows actually females at this age, this is the other thing that I get quite ragey about, we are more likely to be successful entrepreneurs than young guys in flip-flops in San Francisco. And yet we don't get the investment there either. So you kind of, it's like a double whammy. I think there's so much that we could do as females to reframe midlife if we were given the funds to do it properly. But we're not. But actually, females come out with phenomenal ideas at this stage of life. It's a really creative sort of period. We want a legacy to be left. We want a sense of purpose. And if you can harness that and be well, businesses thrive.
Hello and welcome to Women and Wellbeing with me, Natalie Anderson. In today's episode, we are talking how to combat the difficult symptoms of perimenopause with founder and head of research at MPOWDER, Rebekah Brown. So sit back, relax, and get ready to join us in our conversation.
The challenge often is, because our biochemistry is complicated, we're kind of put in the too difficult box. That can't be the reason in this day and age that we're not studied and understood and supported fully, because all I want is a world where women can be well.
Hello all, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you with us. My guest today is changing the landscape for women navigating the transition into perimenopause and menopause with her incredible wellness community, MPOWDER. As a researcher by trade, the origins of MPOWDER began in 2019 in her kitchen as she looked to find a natural way to alleviate her own perimenopause symptoms. Initially dehydrating fruit and vegetables and blending them into a powder, she began to feel a difference and wanted other women to have the same experience. Working with medical and naturopathic teams and collaborating with menopause experts across multiple complementary fields, she was able to refine her blend, leading to a Good Housekeeping Institute award and creating the foundations for the wellness brand we see today. It's been an absolute labour of love for her, and I'm thrilled to welcome her today. It's the fabulous Rebekah Brown. Hi, Rebekah.
Oh my goodness. I was just going back to the kitchen and 2019.
I mean, honestly, how was that for you?
It was swirly is the way I'd describe
swirly,
it.
That's a great word.
My own perimenopause journey. It was really tough, and I'm now nearly 52, but at the time, that period of my life was so confusing because we weren't really having the conversations we're having now. I didn't even know the word perimenopause.
No, I didn't. It was only on this podcast that I heard the word perimenopause, and I was like, what is that? That was about 6 years ago.
And why did no one tell me? And I think, for me, I think like so many of us as females, I just kept pushing on through. So if I look back now and I think to even 4 years prior to when I really, really sort of fell apart, things weren't right, and yet I felt like I needed to work harder, get up earlier, practice more. As a researcher, it was really hard to hold information in my head. I was struggling to kind of have conversations with people at work, and my world got smaller. I think that was the toughest thing. You kind of retreat into yourself, don't you? But that journey back to wellness and learning about the brilliance of our biochemistry, actually, because that's what it is. It's complex because it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the more I learn and the more I sort of applied the learnings from these amazing practitioners that you were referencing in the introduction, the better I got. But it just feels like a lifetime ago now. And I so wished that I'd listened to myself, listened to my body sooner.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like I said, just like you, 6 years ago, perimenopause is a word. It just didn't exist in my own vocabulary. No. What were those early symptoms for you?
Yeah, and I mean, we know from our kind of community research now that I was pretty much bang on statistically what our community data now shares. And for me, the early symptoms were anxiety, just as kind of bubbling up, where I had terrible imposter syndrome as well, actually, at work. And we now know, and there's big bodies of research that highlight that women disproportionately are impacted by imposter syndrome, and also, which is totally counterintuitive, it gets harder for us as we get older. So actually, the more wisdom we have, the more doubting we become of ourselves. So yes, for me, it was imposter syndrome. I really didn't feel up to my job. Huge anxiety and sort of waking up with those heart palpitations. And then that physical change, weight gain, my hair was falling out. I had glorious hormonal acne all over my jawline, which felt really unfair because I'd had that as a teenager as well. but everything was like everything sort of on the outside. It was almost like my body was desperately trying to tell me things, and yet I didn't know how to diagnose that. I just kept going.
And did you then put that down to something else? Were you like, oh, I'm stressed, or because we've heard it a lot. You know, a lot of women kind of go to the doctors at that age, and not so much now, I don't think, but definitely a few years back, you'd go and it'd be like, oh, you're depressed, you're stressed. I'm going to give you antidepressants and all of that kind of thing. Did you experience that as well?
I did, and I think, you know, to be fair to doctors, when I think back on it, and now we know there's obviously 48 plus symptoms associated with menopause. I don't know where we got this memo, but as a female, I felt that I could only ever tell my doctor one thing. You know, when you book an appointment,
you can't talk about anything else.
Exactly. You just mention that one thing. And so, you know, when I think back on it, I was like, well, of course he thought I was depressed, because I went in talking about sort of anxiety, sort of racing heart, not being able to cope with things, you know, distracted mind, not being able to complete things. And that I was, exactly as you say, offered antidepressants, but I kind of knew I wasn't depressed, because even though I hadn't heard of perimenopause, I was aware that some days, you know, I was completely on my knees and I really felt awful, and you know, some very dark times where it felt like, you know, the world would be sort of better off without me. But then there were other days where I could run a small country, you know, and that was the fluctuations I now know that are perimenopause transition. But was it similar for you, that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I still kind of feel all of this. Like, I feel like I'm in the thick of it, really. And I've talked about it a lot on this podcast, and how it messes with your mind. It's like, you know, one month you're like, oh my God, I'm amazing and I feel fantastic. And then the next month you're like, what's wrong with me? And it's horrible, because you can't pinpoint it. You can't kind of, and that's the problem actually with diagnosing it, isn't it? It's the fact that you can go to the doctors and you can have your bloods done and everything, but one month might be completely different to another. And that's the difficulty. But if we go back to like 2019 and you being in the kitchen, I mean, what led you down the path of the dehydration of the fruits and the vegetables and going, okay, I'm going to try this?
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I think being a researcher is probably what saved me, actually, because I wasn't scared of data and big fat research documents, but also I wasn't scared of hustling my way into conferences and listening to people. And I went to a functional medicine conference, and that really opened my eyes to the potential of nutrition, but also talking to people that had been working for years in traditional medicine, you know, herbalists, naturopaths. I'd done a lot to address what was on my plate, but I couldn't squeeze in some of these more unusual herbs, or also look to kind of get enough of something in therapeutic dosage levels that I was reading about as food. It was just, there was just too much of it to consume. And I hadn't even heard of dehydration machines. They're fabulous things. So I bought one of those off Amazon, and I was kind of just playing around with it. I mean, it tasted awful, and it looked disgusting. And I mean, the name MPOWDER actually comes from, you know, the file that I was keeping at the time on my desktop.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's like, you know, my powder. I was just playing around with all these things, but sort of accumulatively I got better. Because I think the other thing is, we're really honest at MPOWDER. The foundational blends we've created, and I'm not the brains behind that. It's Dr. Martins and her team. But those foundational blends, they are foundational layers. They're not silver bullets. And I think what I found was, you know, nutrition helped. These botanicals are phenomenal. And I think we in the West are beginning to appreciate their potential more as we learn more about them. But also I really looked at how I was digesting stress. And I think that's the other thing. You know, all of the stuff we do on the inside is great, but actually it's how we manage the world on the outside as well that's really, really important to us at this stage of life.
So obviously you started to feel better, and you kind of knew instinctively it was kind of what you were doing and the nutrition you were putting into your body. And so from that moment then, when did you make the decision, okay, right, I now need to kind of take this wider? It's
really funny, because I didn't consciously make any decision because, I mean, I think in a weird way that's probably why we are where we are now. I think if I had sat down and thought about it, I would have thought, don't be ridiculous.
I can't do this.
Why would you be doing that? But what I ended up doing, because I'm a researcher, was I was curious about whether other people were struggling like I was, and also what had worked. And it was like a sort of itch I needed to scratch. I needed to know whether what I was doing was similar to what women all over the world were doing. And I tiptoed onto Instagram. I'd never used it before. My son had to set up my account, and I put out a questionnaire. Normally as a researcher, no one fills in your questionnaires. You have to kind of ask very politely. You have to invite them into focus groups and give them sandwiches. This time there was this outpouring of generosity. Women weren't just filling in the kind of yes/no kind of quantitative data.
Yeah.
They were sharing their life stories with me, and it was really humbling and really beautiful, and also actually very encouraging, because so many of the women further on in their journey than me were saying it's going to be okay, and actually this is an emergence and all kinds of amazing things happen to your bodies. But so many of them were talking about what they wished their younger selves had known. And I kind of began to think that, this wisdom that women actually carry in their bones, which we do from the minute we're born, because the world quite often treats us as other, and that's kind of how we have to navigate it. If you could smash that together with all of the stuff I was reading about and all these amazing practitioners, then we can make stuff together. And that's really what MPOWDER does. It's like all of that wisdom, all of that kind of storytelling, quantitative feedback we get, all of the research we do about the potency of our blends, plus really, really smart humans who are at the forefront of their modalities, all feeding in together. Because I kind of feel that's the only way we're going to address menopause, because we're so woefully behind in terms of the research dollars that go into it and how much we know about our biochemistry. We really do need to listen to women, because we kind of know.
Yeah, I mean, you said as well, like, it's 2% of government funding goes towards female reproductive health.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I mean, I kind of I knew it was small, but I didn't realize it was that small. I mean, and that's ridiculous, isn't it?
It is, and even less obviously goes to menopause. I mean, so much of it, understandably, is focused on fertility, but we don't really know why females experience menopause. And we know when we look to the animal kingdom, we're not quite sure either, because not every mammal does. So it's fascinating. I think I was talking to someone the other day actually who's doing a lot of research into psychedelics and menopause, which is fascinating. But the challenge often is, because our biochemistry is complicated, we're kind of put in the too difficult box. That can't be the reason in this day and age that we're not studied and understood and supported fully, because all I want is a world where women can be well.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, it feels really frustrating, and I'm sure you find this with your community because it's growing so rapidly and expanding, is you get to this age, and like you said before, you've got all this experience, all this wisdom, and your body just doesn't let you do what it is you want to do. It's like, you think, I could build amazing businesses and I could do all of this, and then your body, you feel like you're being let down, and that's awful to say that about your own body, but I know that will resonate with a lot of people, and I'm sure it's the same for you.
Yeah. I mean, so much of the conversation we have in our communities, there's sort of two things that are often a sign, I think, that we're entering perimenopause. One is, I just don't feel like me, and you can't quite put your finger on it. And doctors will say to us, that's quite often how they diagnose now. You'll go into the surgery and you'll say, I'm not quite sure what it is. It's just kind of everything. I just don't feel like me. And then the other bit is that sense that your body's betrayed you, and you get cross because, as you say, you've got all of this thinking and wisdom to share with the world, and your body no longer behaves like it used to. But I think it's also an invitation. It is, and quite often our body isn't behaving like it should because we're not listening hard enough, and we don't push ourselves up the priority list because we're female and we're worried about everyone else in the world. And so I think with the right support, sometimes this life stage can be a real invitation to kind of work out what you want part of you to be. And the research shows actually females at this age, this is the other thing that I get quite ragey about, we are more likely to be successful entrepreneurs than young guys in flip-flops in San Francisco. And yet we don't get the investment there either. So you kind of, it's like a double whammy. I think there's so much that we could do as females to reframe midlife if we were given the funds to do it properly. But we're not. But actually, females come out with phenomenal ideas at this stage of life. It's a really creative sort of period. We want a legacy to be left. We want a sense of purpose. And if you can harness that and be well, businesses thrive for women in midlife.
I agree with you. I think, though, the magic ingredient is often community.
Yeah.
Because whilst maybe when we were young, we felt we could do everything on our own, as you get older, you do rely more on that kind of community network. Everybody has to have a job, because if everybody's doing their job brilliantly, then we're more likely to make advancements, and I'm sure that that's the experience for you.
Totally. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of curating or sort of holding space largely because I'm not the expert actually within the community. It's the naturopaths, the herbalists, the doctors, all of the people that support us, but also the females sharing their stories is really what makes MPOWDER different to any other supplement brand, I think. But you're absolutely right. I think also, that sense of community, we instinctively as females, I feel, often build things differently. Because communities are kind of messy. You can't put it on a spreadsheet with an organisational structure. It's kind of a different way of approaching things. It's far more organic and sort of heart-led. But again, I think that's what the world needs. We need more of that.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of like your blend, the Peri Boost and the Meno Boost, and now you've got the mood food as well. Those blends, how did you then take them kind of to market? Because I know you're in Boots, you're in Selfridges, John Lewis. What was the early journey like?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, again, almost like a series of unexpected doors opening. I mean, it's been really, really challenging. I wouldn't recommend anyone starting a business in a pandemic. But the beginnings of it were we got to a point with Peri Boost, which was our first product, where Dr. Martens had created this amazing formula, and we knew from her own clinical experience, because she spent 10 years at Marion Glut Clinic, so she was kind of working with these herbs and with women all the time. And all of the stuff in our blends are the kind of the best research, because I think even though we see real results with other herbs in the kind of herbalist's toolkit, you will find that we need that Western medicine support to feel comfortable. So she'd created this formulation that was based on sort of the best researched herbs in the Western world, and we'd recruited 50 women through Instagram to track their symptoms with us for 60 days. And then the pandemic happened. We were desperately trying to get these things out the door. And that cohort of women, this was in the early days when none of us knew how to use Zoom.
Yeah, remember those days?
And that was the seed of the community, because we propped each other up for 60 days. And those women, we called anyone that's been part of our kind of collaboration work makers, and they stay with us forever. But some of them have become really good friends. And as a result of that, Cult Beauty kind of heard about us. And the founder of Cult Beauty was a real champion of female innovators, and she just said, let's list it, let's see how it goes, which I didn't expect to happen. And then Selfridges picked it up as well. And I also remember one of the makers travelling all the way from Norwich to Selfridges to see it in the London store, because she'd made it with us. It was her feedback, that's the thing about MPOWDER. It really is that community feedback loop. And Peri Boost is on its fourth formulation now, because as new science comes to light, we're always refining the blend, trying to ensure that it's got everything in it that we know is good for you in perimenopause. And so those people have been through the life stages in the same way that I have, actually, of these formulations. They feel really invested in them. And so, that's how it began. And then it sort of took on its own life. And, women, I think, buy from other women. So,
yes, 100%.
We're a tiny brand. We don't have the marketing budgets and things of other supplements. And I think people often think we're bigger than we are, because we are very tiny. But it's women telling other women. And that's really what's grown the community as well.
But it works as well. I was lucky enough to have some of the Peri Boost, and it is amazing, and it does make you feel brilliant and make you feel just more energized. And I think the word is probably level.
Yes,
that's the word that I would use, is that it does make you feel much, much more level. And you collaborated on one of our incredible events, our Perimeno meetup, which it was amazing to hear the feedback from our women as well, of how they'd got it in a goodie bag, and they were like, this is amazing, this is brilliant, this is what we need. And being able to have the conversation though now, and we've got to thank people like Davina for opening up the menopause conversation, which has led to the perimenopause conversation, because yes, a lot of work has been done across the menopause landscape, but I feel like the perimenopause is something we're still trying to kind of get people to understand. Like, this is the bit before, and this is kind of where you come in. It's like you're at the start of the journey, and we'll take you all the way through menopause and beyond. In terms of that, you are expanding, and you've just expanded into the US, which is really exciting. You recently went out to Austin as part of the Hormone House Party and the conversation that's happening out there. What are the biggest differences that you saw?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the biggest difference is they are, in terms of kind of awareness, about 2 years behind the UK. And actually they look to the UK quite a lot, because here there's that grassroots activism. You think about the achievements of people like Davina, but also people on the ground who'd had truly awful experiences navigating this stage of life themselves, who effectively lobbied for legislative change.
Diane Dansbury.
She's phenomenal.
She's phenomenal. We had her on here, and she's incredible, the work that she's done.
I mean, people like that have changed our secondary school system. They've changed the way that we're treated at work. And in the US, they sort of look to the UK a little bit as a model for that. And so what you'll find in the US at the moment is they're having that conversation about why we shouldn't be scared about HRT. There's still a real issue over there in terms of access and understanding and kind of fear from that WHI study. But I feel like they're moving at pace. And actually what's really interesting about the US, perhaps because they are far more focused on preventative care, there's a real recognition of that need to layer up. The HRT is fantastic for those that choose or are able to take it. But there are no silver bullets, and we really need to be looking at how we move, how we eat, all of these things. So the conversation is slightly different, but I would say that they're waking up to the fact that there's this huge injustice that we got really, really motivated by here in the UK probably 2 or 3 years ago now.
And do you think it's helpful to have people like, you've got Halle Berry with Respin, and you've got Naomi Watts with Stripes, and Gillian Anderson and Oprah. You've got, all these incredible women kind of really pushing the conversation and not being frightened either, because, I know, like, I've listened to many chats with Naomi Watts, and she went into early menopause when she was around 35. But again, she didn't want to talk about it because it would have an impact on her career and how people saw her. Do you think it's brilliant that these women now are kind of being fearless and saying, right, okay, actually, we're not doing that. We're opening this conversation up. Do you think it's helpful?
I think it's really helpful. And I think, people that are using their platforms in that way is such a generous thing to do, because there's risks associated with it. And we know from our own research, and there's research in the UK here from a think tank called Gen M, that more women now identify with the statement menopause as a taboo topic than they did a couple of years ago. And I think they're almost going through the same challenges that these celebrities talk to, which is they suddenly feel judged for their age. Probably a few years ago in the UK, they felt frustrated that no one got it and no one understood. Now more people understand. They're almost fearful that they're going to be written off, and it's become more uncomfortable, particularly in the workplace, to have the conversation than it was before. So we really need to address that. And I think those kind of conversations where strong females with a profile are saying this isn't actually acceptable and I'm absolutely able to do my job and more at this stage of life is going to hopefully filter down as well into the workplace and ensure that we don't get stigmatised.
Yeah, because it's frustrating, that is, because ultimately then you're kind of then having to be better, doubly better, if you know what I mean. It's like, I know you know that there's all these symptoms and that potentially I could, suffer with any one of the 58 or 60 or whatever it is that there are. So now, so it would make you nervous to talk about it. But at the same time, like you say, we have to stay galvanised. We have to stay kind of moving with the conversation. And in terms of your blend, because I know the botanicals are massively important and what makes MPOWDER different, what is the situation with the botanicals that we need?
And that's a really good question. I think the main sort of challenge with working with botanicals is ensuring you're actually getting what you think you get into the UK, because the supplement space can be horribly unregulated and a little bit snake oily. So it's really important that you're looking at your supply chain and where stuff comes from, and making sure it's the right part of the botanical as well, because obviously there's many components to a plant, and some of the cheaper bits can often be passed off as because they are still the ingredient, but they're not actually the active. So that's one of the challenges you have in the UK working with kind of herbal formulations. And then the other challenge is sort of access to and the ability to talk to the results that are seen in trial, because quite understandably, the European Food Standards Authority has not found a way really to assess Mother Nature in the same way as we would assess a pharmaceutical drug. Right. So that's the other challenge of working with botanicals here, and actually anywhere in the world where there is regulation around claims, is that balance between knowing potentials, seeing trial results, being able to access and share those trial results, but not being able to tell people about the potential of that botanical. And I really hope that will change, because again, it's a bit like our conversation about female biochemistry. Mother Nature is also really complicated. And, depending on the season and what's happened sort of environmentally, then obviously the potency of different things is impacted. And it's like, how do we navigate that in order not to sort of shut down the conversation about the potential of plants, but to kind of recognise their complexity in the same way that we need to recognise the complexity of females. So that's that's what I like to talk to, because I think sometimes we can misinterpret that and think, well, there's no science that shows that botanicals have got potential, but there actually is a huge amount of research. It's often not as well funded as pharmaceutical stuff, but that potential is there, and that's where science begins. That's what's really exciting about being in this moment in time, is that we are curious, I think, about these traditional practices, these functional medicine protocols, and we need the research dollars to allow us to really kind of go into that in more detail. But we also need more protocols in terms of how we evaluate, females, because we're very different and we have cycles. So when we're doing trials, we're tricky. And similarly, Mother Nature, how do we evaluate Mother Nature's potential too?
And do you think that lack of funding is because people are saying, oh, it's not worth researching?
I think...
It sounds silly saying that, doesn't it? But I think that is it.
I would be... There's the cynic in me, and I am an eternal optimist. The cynic in me would say, you can't patent Mother Nature.
Right.
So sometimes the research dollars don't go into certain ingredients because who's going to benefit commercially from that insight? So that's a challenge. And then sometimes you'll get, so there's some amazing research, for example, that's come out about cacao, and that obviously is a gift from Mother Nature. But quite often they're then sponsored by big food or big pharma because they're trying to squeeze that into a story about, a chocolate bar. Which obviously isn't the same as the cacao bean. But so I think that's also the issue, is like, where does the funding come from and what's the potential once that is understood? Who benefits from that insight? That's the challenge.
That is so frustrating. But again, it leads me nicely on to kind of the next topic to talk to you about, which is, in recent years, we have seen kind of a huge influx of menopause products, and whether it's creams or, again, supplements or this or that. How do you navigate that? Because, you're trying to do something brilliantly and you're researching it and you've got so much behind it and you're not just sticking a label on it. How do you navigate kind of making sure that you cut through and that people do see the work that you're doing? Yeah,
it's really tricky, to be honest. I often say we're not a supplement range, we're a community, because being placed in the supplement category where there aren't the guardrails and there isn't the kind of scrutiny on ingredients makes it really, really hard to do good things, because understandably there's been a huge criticism of what has happened in that kind of meno-washing of foods, of everything, really. I mean, you can get cereals, you can get pretty much everything. And as females, you've got that as a challenge, because when you're feeling really rubbish, I mean, I've tried everything. I literally went through my whole health food aisle, and it's not just the stuff that's got the label menopause. It's ingredients like, standing in front of 7 different types of magnesium and trying to work out which one's actually bioavailable. So it's really, really challenging. I think the way to navigate it is, we are old enough and wise enough as females to know that there are no silver bullets. So anyone promising, I mean, some of the advertising that I get served on social media, particularly, where it can be pushed out kind of knowing that it's not legal and taken down really, really quickly. I've had promises that, my back fat would disappear within like 2 days, which I didn't think was possible. But, all of that stuff's being pushed at us as females. And I think we just have to trust our gut a little bit, because the brands are doing good things. And the other challenge is if you sort of, dismiss everyone, innovation won't happen. Yeah. And so that is the balance. It can be really demoralising sometimes to feel that we've been sort of, held alongside less scrupulous brands. But also you have to keep going, because if we don't keep going and we don't stay curious about potential, then we're basically saying to people there are no other options.
I think the thing that frustrates me more than anything is it's the same as the diet culture. Yeah. Like, people that desperately do want to lose weight for health benefits, for whatever reason, and they are really desperate, and they will turn to anything for a quick fix. I mean, we've seen, with Ozempic and all of that, kind of those weight loss jabs. When people are desperate and when people feel, like which way do they turn, they will spend and they will do silly things as well. And that's so harmful to us. And I get really cross because I just feel like you're just playing on people's insecurities. You're playing on, you're basically taking money from people just to profit. When you don't realise how desperate these people are, women at this stage of life. it can be soul destroying. It can be difficult. Like you said, you're on your knees. I know I've had dark days, and you do want anything. You're like, please, anything. So it just feels really frustrating that these big companies are just trying to profit from what is a very difficult time. I mean, it can be amazing, and like you said before, it can be really empowering, but there is a transition that can be hard work. In terms of like cutting through, and I know you've brought mood food, so I want to talk to you about it. Tell me, so that we can tell our audience, what makes you different? What is it? I know it's community based as well, and it's not just one thing. It's very much, like we were saying before, practitioners and the supplements as well. But yours are different. I mean, tell me about it.
I think the main thing that makes us different is that co-invention, the feedback loop that means that about 36% of our consumers will track their symptoms with us. And so as a researcher, that means I'm always being able to sort of see the impact in the real world, on the days that you forget it, on the days that you go away for the weekend, because that's really interesting to me. And we can then refine and improve and kind of develop. And we can also see what symptoms are still troubling people. And, mood food was a result of 4 years of tracking and realising that there was this cluster set of symptoms that happen as a result of the way that our hormones play together, which means that, if you're struggling with sleep, you're very likely to be struggling with cognitive function and mood as well. And so we looked to, again, sort of herbal medicine and naturopathy to select the best research botanicals that really just target those cluster symptoms. And I think our job really is to listen to females and then to invent where they need the support, where they're telling us they can't find something that works.
So in terms of the cluster symptoms, what were the ones that you were addressing? So with mood food, it's the anxiety, cognitive function, sleep. And it's so fascinating to see that they all impact each other in that way. And also I think the fascinating thing for me, because I'm not a herbalist, is learning from people like Dr. Martens, because there's a lot of really interesting research around ashwagandha. And if you're buying ashwagandha, to my point earlier about what part of the plant, please look for ashwagandha KSM 66, which is a patented extract. It's organic. It means we know exactly what part of the plant it's coming from, because nature does pack a powerful punch, and it can be bad for us if we get the wrong bit of something. So ashwagandha is really interesting, but it works even better again with herbal synergy. So I found that really fascinating, that you can work with therapeutic dosage levels that are really safe for people by blending something like ashwagandha with lemon balm and bacopa and the turmeric that's in there, and it's a kind of that complete set is what makes it really work. So I think that's the other thing that I've learned, is that it's better to do that and to understand that you're getting the right level of stuff than to be sort of formulating in the kitchen like I was with my dehydration machine, because that's what makes it truly efficacious and safe for you to take as well. And mood food, it's been amazing. It's one of those ones where people who take it absolutely swear by it, but also men take it as well, which I love. That's great. That's really good.
And we would never recommend that guys try our powdered formulations, but both mood food and gut instinct they're safe for guys, and it's because they've seen the impact on their partners, which to me is the biggest sort of testament to its efficacy of all, is that they're like, okay, I'll give it a go.
I mean, it sounds amazing, and all of the ingredients that you listed in there, just what to look out for and what's kind of working and what's beneficial. Thank God you did stand at the kitchen, in your kitchen in 2019, blending everything away and dehydrating everything. Before we do finish up, though, I want to know kind of what's next.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the USA, and I'm really interested by this because we work with expert practitioners here in the UK, but in the US we'll be working very differently. We're working within multidisciplinary clinics where they're effectively layering up MPOWDER as a modality alongside their other disciplines, which is, a huge privilege for us to be taken with that much weight, that they recognise how impactful we can be to their patients. So that's really exciting. And then we have 3 new blends coming out this year. And again, they're kind of focused on what females are telling us really trouble them. So we're going to be deep diving more into circadian rhythms and sleep. We're looking at hair loss, which is really close to my heart. And there's another really exciting one coming down the line as well. So that's going on. And then we're taking our hormone house parties on tour, so I'm hoping that you'll be able to join one.
Yes, I would love to come along. I would. I'm desperate to kind of be part of the hormone house party. I mean, it's such a great name for a start. It sounds amazing.
They're just brilliant celebrations. So I think that's the other thing. Back to your point around, needing to keep galvanising. we also need to reframe how we see this life stage. Like you say, it can be really hard, and it's not all unicorns and rainbows. But when we learn about the brilliance of our biochemistry, that's kind of what those hormone house parties are there to do.
Oh, Rebekah, thank you so much for your time. This has been such an incredible chat, and I'm sure it's going to really, really resonate with our listeners and our audience. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, sadly, we have run out of time for today, but it's been an absolute joy to have you with me. If you'd like to find out more about MPOWDER, you can visit the website www.mpowderstore or join the community on Instagram at mpowder.store. For more women's health and lifestyle, you can visit us at our website, www.thecapsule.co.uk. You can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by visiting the podcast page and subscribing to any of our podcast channels and YouTube. Please feel free to leave your rates and reviews, as we would love to hear from you as the series goes on. You can also drop us a message at our Instagram at officialcapsule if you'd like to put any questions to any of our future guests or leave a message about any of our current episodes. I will be back next week with another very special guest, but today all that's left for us to say is goodbye. So it's goodbye from Rebekah.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And goodbye from me.